everybody! In this lesson, we are going to cover the People tab in the new Google Classroom. So make sure that you are in one of your classrooms in classroom.google.com. And so we're going to take you through what this will look like. Now, we noticed the restructure of the new Google Classroom. We have a stream, we have classwork, and we have people. People has now been condensed so that it's where teachers and students, as well as emailing guardians, is all in one convenient place. When you go to the People tab, you're going to see that it starts off with teachers and you'll be the only teacher listed. What you can do is you can hit the Invite Teachers button, the little person with the plus to the right-hand side of the teachers. And this is where you can invite another teacher. You can simply start typing their name and the global address book should come up. Now, they can see and do everything you do in the class except actually delete the entire class itself. What you can also do with the three little dots on the side of the name, you can also remove that person from the class. This is very handy if you are in fact to have a student teacher and you want to be able to give them access to your classroom for a certain amount of time so that they can be a co-teacher and create those assignments and that workflow for the students. So this is nice to be able to put them in. You could also consider putting in some of the other people in your building, like perhaps a learning coach or a tech coach or an administrator who's helping to be able to work with students in your classroom. Because remember, when we create assignments and content in the classroom, it doesn't always have to be for everyone in the classroom. It could just be a specialized assignment for a specific group of people. So if you do have somebody coming in to do some small group work with some of your students, they would have the ability to create the assignment for them and just for them inside the same Google Classroom. The other thing you can do is you can transfer ownership. So let's say, for example, I have a Google Classroom, it's already going, lots of information in it, whether that's for an academic classroom or perhaps it's for a sports team or a club. And let's say I leave, I go on an amazing vacation, maybe I'm going on a maternity leave, got a job at Starbucks, who knows. What you can do is you can transfer ownership of the classroom to somebody else. So you still remain one of those co-teachers, but now somebody else officially owns that classroom and has those basically deleting permissions. So that's what that looks like when I go ahead and I can say make class owner. Now, just so you know, anywhere that you see in the Google Classroom, if you see an email button, please note that this is not functional. Because we do not have Gmail enabled for Edmonton Catholic Schools, none of those email buttons will work. You'll need to be able to contact and email your students via Outlook. Or of course, you can create a class announcement and then they would of course get the email notification and the announcement created for them right there in that classroom, in addition to private comments, which we'll cover in a later lesson. So lots of ways to communicate with the teachers and the students in your classroom, but just not via the email button. Now, the other thing I can do is you'll see students. Here I have 2 students in my classroom. I can add students by name, but truthfully, honestly, our best recommendation for you is don't waste your time. Every time you type all that list of 30 students' names, you're doing a disservice to yourself and every other teacher who wants to invite those kids to a Google Classroom. The first time, especially when you have brand new little bitty students, it's going to take some patience. But really, we've invited students via the class code, students as young as 4 years old, students in grade 12, it doesn't matter. They get used to joining with that class code, especially if you take our advice of having smaller classrooms. Kids will join classrooms often. And so it's a really, really good skill for them to be able to have. So resist the temptation to do it for them. They really can enter that class code and be able to join that class. It saves you some time. But now let's say you really did need to enter a name of a student who was unable to enter that class code or unable for some reason to do it. You can go ahead and put in that student name and be able to invite them. So I could, for example, start typing in my son, Max Rofi. It would come up in the list here. I could invite him. I'm not going to. He's in high school today. Hey, Max. I don't think he wants to be in this sample classroom. All right. So now what we're going to do is I'm also going to show you there's some options once you have your students in here. Notice there's a little action button that is been sort of grayed out. I can select all my students, or I can select an individual student, up to you. The actions are the same. Just note, again, a couple of things I can do. The email has been disabled, so that's not going to work, sorry. But I can remove a student. Let's say Dane is my student and he's changed sections or he's moved schools. He's going to be able to be taken out of that classroom so he can no longer interact with it. This is also where I can mute a specific student. Perhaps Dane, you know what, we're gonna work on some of his interactions in class. He can still submit his work, but he cannot reply to classmates' work. He cannot comment or post. That's all been completely disabled for him. I'll cancel that. Dane's a good guy, but I can change that at any time. If I did mute him, I can also unmute him. So let's see what that looks like. I'll mute him, mute. We've been working on some things. Dane's good to go, no problem now. We've had a few conversations. We've had a few chances to practice that. So I can see that he's been muted here. I can go ahead and select him, and I can, of course, unmute him really easily so that he can rejoin our digital collaboration. Finally, it's the email our guardians. You can go ahead and you can invite guardians to be part of your class summaries. Now remember, we talked about those class summaries. They are not an invitation into the classroom. We do not want parents interacting in our classrooms. This is simply an email overview where they're going to see basically the announcements, upcoming work, missing work. They're not going to see any marks. They're not going to see any actual documents or work of the students. They're not going to see any class comments or discussions. It's just to keep tabs on, oh yeah, Dane has this essay coming up. You know, how's that going? Did you get that done? That sort of thing. They can have a conversation at home. But what you'll notice here, I've turned on the email guardian summaries, and already my demo student, Danny Moss, is the guardian. How is that already there? Well, because it happened from a previous classroom. If you had a student that had the email guardian summaries entered by another teacher, it'll automatically carry over here. So here's what's really great. Let's say teacher Trish puts in all those kids, puts in all those emails of those parents. The next teacher that teaches that kid can just turn on email guardian summaries, and it's all the email addresses have already been put in there. But here's how we get them in. Right now I can invite Dane's guardians. I can go ahead and I can type an email address. I'll just put in mine. You can have multiple email addresses, and the email addresses can be from any email. It doesn't have to be a Gmail. So I can go ahead and I can say invite, and right there it's been invited. And so I can choose as a parent, again, I can unsubscribe for those emails. Really do have a conversation with your parents. Do you want an email summary from the Google Classroom? Some do and some don't. Great question to ask your parents, especially if you're already going to be asking for their email addresses. I find a good practice is those kids who need it, have the email summaries. Those kids who don't, well, that's okay too. Your call. You're the amazing teacher professionals and you know what is needed best. So that's it. That is really the awesome part about the people stream, because it's all in one place. I can control what's happening and who is in my class. So give it a try. Organize your class, invite those kids. You can do it with the class code. And now we're going to jump into the absolute best part of Google Classroom, which is classwork. You know it's a big lesson next one, but I will break it down into smaller videos. If you have any questions, please just let me know.